It's time for another episode of Tucson Means Business, featuring Tucson's top entrepreneurs and leaders in the business world. And now your host, Mark Bishop.
And it's time once again for another Tucson Means Business, where we feature lead businesses, I should say, in Tucson, along with the leaders in their field who have these businesses. And I'm referring to a fellow like the name of Paul Hardison. Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, Mark.
He's a PhD, Chief Executive Officer, and a founding partner of a brand new travel concern. And because it's not a typical agency, we're going to find out all about it, but it's very special. It's called Trouvé, which in French means a lucky find. So we've had a lucky find in finding him to come on the show today. And he'll be doing his own show, as you're going to be hearing on Tucson Business Radio X, called Trouvé Travel Talk. And that'll be a lot of fun dealing with a lot of people who have taken trips and tours. So if you like travel, that's one podcast to look out for, okay? Also, I have Kathy Winger. Good afternoon, Kathy.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Kathy is a lawyer, a top lawyer, but she does a lot of other interesting things. We're going to find out all about that as well. And last but not least is a gentleman by the name of Richard Phipps. Hello, Richard.
Hello, everyone.
Richard is a branch manager and sales leader in Tucson of a wonderful firm called Onin, O-N-I-N. They do staffing. And you've been in talent acquisition for what now? Staffing as a professional for over 13 years, I think. Hands-on and leadership experience in the Tucson area. How did you ever get into that, Richard? Tell me.
Well, I started in HR, and it's always one of those things that kind of sideways into staffing, bringing in talent. You learn early on in your HR career that if you bring in the right people the first time, you don't have issues later on in there.
Fantastic. And Kathy Winger, well, a business, corporate, real estate, and cybersecurity attorney. This is the interesting part, particularly today, who represents companies and individuals in commercial and corporate transactions. Now, cybersecurity, without being a sexist, is that a normal thing a female lawyer would get into? Tell me.
No, I don't think it's a normal thing that a female lawyer would get into. And I don't think it's sexist. I think actually the whole tech industry tends to be very male dominated. And I do a lot of speaking at national and local conferences on cybersecurity. And I notice that there's a big push these days, in these types of conferences to stay away from all male panels and to have women represented on the panels and to make a conscious effort to do that. So I think the tech industry is finding that to be an issue, and they're trying to address it. And there are, many women who are in the tech field who refuse to speak on panels unless, refuse to speak on all male panels. So I think there's a push towards that. I also think I'm a little bit unusual as a lawyer in cybersecurity because my practice is transactional. I'm not a litigator. And so my perspective on cybersecurity, what I talk about when I go to these events and what I speak to people about are what a business lawyer wants her clients to know about cybersecurity. So I'm a little unique in that regard, too.
My word. And I appreciate the time you've given us today as well. Thank you, Kathy.
Happy to be here, Mark.
Whether it's been throughout the U.S., in fact, 35 trips to Hawaii, the lucky devil, or internationally to a variety of European countries, including England, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Romania, along with the Middle East, Israel, Jordan. Oh, my God, who is this fellow? Well, he's Dr. Hardison. He has the travel savvy and business sense to lead this brand new company called TrouvéTravel.org. Additional careers in science and education, because how does one come out of what he does into travel? So Dr. Hardison is combining all three areas to best leverage Trouvé's focus, activities, and growth. But our university professor, Dr. Hardison, earned a university-level professional teaching award line 2013 from the University of North Dakota back then. He is also an active planetary scientist who regularly publishes world-class scientific research with an emphasis on main belt asteroids and their compositions. Heavens above. Have we got anything coming at us? Can you tell us that so we can sleep at night once and for all?
I don't think you have to worry tonight.
Not tonight.
Not right.
Oh, very nice. We've got a night, Richard. Now, seriously, is there anything out there to be concerned?
Well, there are about 11,000-ish near-Earth asteroids that are monitored that come fairly close, outside the Earth-Moon distance, for example. Some come within the Earth-Moon distance, but they have well-defined orbits, and they're being watched, and no collision courses as of now. Although if you want me to keep you up at night, I can tell you what to worry about.
I don't know if I could ask him, to be honest with you.
I was going to say I could probably help you with that, too.
Okay, so you're a bit of a foodie as well. You have a blog called Astro Foodie, well, duh, and soon contribute to your entrepreneurial drive and enthusiasm. You're looking at perhaps a franchise restaurant in upscale lobster restaurant of all things. He's just done a trip to Maine, I believe, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that as well. What got you into travel, other than you love personally traveling?
Yeah, well, this whole experience is what I call the unexpected journey, so that makes me think of Hobbits because of the movie. If you would have asked me before 2017 whether I'd gotten into this, I'd say you were crazy. And it was sort of a confluence of a couple of events that made this happen. First off, I really was not terribly enamored with North Dakota and living there. It's very cold, and I generally don't like cold weather, and I decided one day, or I asked myself one day, do I want to spend the next 25 years of my life in North Dakota teaching? And the answer within less than 5 seconds was no. So that was kind of the start of it, and then jumped to summer 2016, and I went on my very first small ship sail in the Caribbean, and we went island hopping from St. Martin to St. Lucia, and I absolutely adored that more than I ever thought I would. I drooled over that for 6 months before I did it, and I absolutely loved it. And then 6 months later, early 2017, when I was on sabbatical at the University of New Mexico in Las Cruces, I received an opportunity to get involved in business, which is what led to Treve. It wasn't Treve at the time. It was sort of the scattered remnants of a previous company of sorts. But once I said yes, and I had no business background, I really had no business saying yes. Really, I didn't. I didn't.
No business saying yes, right?
Yeah, no kidding. And so once I got the books, which were kind of pathetic, and I realized that the model that was previously used was just not going to work, we spent the next 6 months trying to decide what we want Treve to be. And so that's what we became, which is a small travel experience company.
So the vision is what, in a nutshell?
To connect people to the world. That's the tagline. And so we have kind of 3 areas of focus right now. We have our big signature travel experiences, which are all-inclusive travel experiences that we create in-house, and they can be in the U.S. or they can be around the world, that we create, we conduct, we host them, and we really try to make the itinerary very special. That's something that people won't usually find. Then the second part is day trips. We have day trips in New York City. We have day trips in Tucson. And we ultimately, the vision is to have day trips in every state in the country. Because you don't have to travel 5,000 miles to learn something or experience something new and unique that you didn't know before. I mean, how many people, if you have lived somewhere, how often have you not gone around and explored your local area? A lot of people don't do that just as a matter of fact that they work there.
Yeah, a lot of people never get out of the state, do they?
Right, and they're busy, but they don't think about getting out and looking around. So that's the day trip idea. And the third part is getting into B2B travel services, working with businesses to either plan travel events for them for groups, for events, or to actually put together group travel experiences that are for the business or some members of the business.
So that could be like conferences or motivational. It could be a company that says, look, I got great execs, but they need a kick in the butt. Can we take them somewhere and, yell in their ears?
Exactly. And the idea for that is basically turnkey, beginning to end travel services for other businesses that they don't have to worry about planning anything. We work together and we work to help them achieve their mission. So that's the idea there.
Fabulous. And, to better understand, experience, and appreciate the amazing diversity, cultures, histories, and natural environments. Kathy, a lot of travel, you herd it like cattle. You don't get to see anything. It's mainly just the predominant places. That's why I really love the concept of Treve. It's going to be able to, 5 to 20 maybe? 10 couples? How does it work, Paul?
Yeah, that's good that you brought that up. This is a focus on small group travel. So we kind of top it out at 20 people. 5 is our loose minimum, but top it off at 20, because if you go more than 20, then that turns into the big coach bus kind of tour, and people don't get to know each other. And so we want to keep that small group feel. And when we went to Maine, which Mark mentioned, everybody kind of got to know each other. And one guy mentioned that he didn't really expect that when he planned to travel. I don't expect to make friends with people who I'm with. Well, it happened, and it was pretty neat, as well as eating a ridiculous amount of lobster. You have no idea how much lobster 15 people can eat over 3.5 days.
Well, in doing my research, Paul, I noticed that they actually went out on the lobster fishing boat. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a company called Lucky Catch. Imagine that, Lucky Catch. But,
puns are flying everywhere today, aren't they?
But it was an actual lobster boat. But it was a hands-on experience. They pulled up lobster traps, got a couple of lobsters, told us how big they have to be if you can keep them, because there are size limitations for the lobsters. We caught rock crabs, we caught Jonah crabs, we pulled out kelp, and people got to get a hold of the lobsters, and it was an experiential activity. It wasn't just a stand there and learn. It was actually a do type
physically
of thing,
handling it,
which was
right.
really, really nice. Everybody really enjoyed that.
And then you eat them.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's a good thing. It's like putting your hands in the earth, and rubbing it before I grow it. Kathy Winger is a business, corporate, real estate, and cybersecurity attorney, but she does a lot of other things, like executive vice president of the board of directors for Boy Scouts of America, Catalina Council, and serves on the advisory board for the National Bank of Arizona Women's Financial Group. Ooh, that's heavy stuff. And she's also on the board of directors of the Southern Arizona Children's Advocacy Center. It is a member of the Better Business Bureau of Southern Arizona. Do you have a favorite of this lot or what?
Oh, no, I could never choose a favorite. Those are really the organizations that you mentioned, Boy Scouts, the Women's Financial Group, and the Children's Advocacy Center. Those are really 3 of my favorite in Tucson.
You give a lot of your time?
I do give a lot of my time, but the mission of each of them is worth it to me to do it. And I'm happy to devote any time that I can to the mission of those organizations.
That's lovely of you. Well, you've more than 20 years of experience as an attorney in the private sector. And prior to that, you served as an in-house counsel to a national bank and financial services. That's probably where the connection was it? The company that, did you know one day that you'd leave and be on your own? I mean, it's a big step.
Absolutely not. In fact, I didn't even know that I would be in Tucson or in Arizona. I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I attended law school in the Philadelphia area, and I practiced law outside of Philadelphia for years after I graduated. And that was when I was an in-house attorney to the bank and financial services company.
Right.
So I really had no idea, didn't know a lot about Tucson, didn't know a lot about Arizona, had never considered living here for a millisecond. That changed when I met my now husband, who was living here, and I ended up out here. So no, I didn't really anticipate that I would be on my own until later years. Early on as an attorney, I liked being in house. I enjoyed being part of the company and a member of the company, and the people that I dealt with on legal matters were my co-employees.
Right.
So I knew them, and we were a team, and I enjoyed that. But
that's pretty marvelous. I think it's another lady through no glass ceiling aid is taking over. You're currently a solo practitioner.
About that.
Well, yes, it's women's future. I'm telling you. You watch what happens in the elections, and God knows what else. You do frequently speak nationally and locally about cybersecurity issues from the perspective of a business lawyer, and your audiences include business owners like CEOs, CFOs, financial execs, lawyers, brothers and sister lawyers, insurance brokers, health insurance professionals, and technology professionals. Are they clueless or what?
No, they're not clueless. Not at all. It's really me. I'll talk to anybody who will listen to me when it comes to cybersecurity. So it's not them. And really, what started me doing that was, as you mentioned, my background in banking and financial services. That was over 20 years ago before I moved to Tucson. But cybersecurity was always an issue in the bank. And in the financial services industry, we issued credit cards. So electronic data and protecting electronic electronic data was always an issue. So I like to say I was involved in cybersecurity before it became cool.
Oh, wow.
So then fast forward to now, and it's really become an issue for everyone, not just banks. And so my business clients, that's an issue that they have to face and they have to manage the risk of. So that's really what started me talking about it. I realized how things had changed from the time I was in the banking industry till now, and decided I had to make everyone aware of the risk that they were facing and help them with suggestions as to what they could do to manage it.
Well, I tell you what, Richard, it's become fairly prolific, isn't it? Nobody can, your banking, any business you run, people's bookings, everything we think about today is online just about. And you just wonder where the devil it's all going to go, because keep doing what you're doing, Kathy. We appreciate it, I can assure you.
I'm happy to.
Richard, you find people to go into these heavy-duty jobs, don't you? You're a specialist in finding people for the right jobs.
That is correct. Businesses all over Tucson are always looking for quality personnel. And it takes a lot of time and effort to be able to do that. So my role as a talent acquisition manager, as a branch manager, is to find the best person to be able to fit those roles that our clients need. We specialize in being our client's caretaker. We want to solve that problem for them so they can focus on running their business. It takes a lot to run a business.
Well, this is it. You have a blended family that includes 7 grown children and 7 grandchildren.
7 and 7.
7 and 7. That keeps you busy. What is it? Dumb question. What is Madden football?
Madden football, PlayStation.
Oh, okay. On PS4, now I get it. You see, I never did it. You know what I mean? I was too busy working.
That's my diversion. the mindless playing of that.
So who do you follow in the NFL, as a matter of interest?
I'm from Pittsburgh, so I'm a Steelers fan.
You're a Steeler fan.
I thought you'd say Eagles. I can't believe it.
I go with the winners. 6 championship rings, you got to go with them.
You know what I like about the Steelers? Yellow and black. They're the colours of my team, Richmond, in the Australian rules football.
Oh, okay.
Listen, I guess when you first came to Tucson, things were quite different then to as they are now.
Very different. I came here in 1967. I remember when the end of Speedway in Wilmot, that was a dirt road. That was a 4-way stop, and we used to make our U-turn and go back down and cruise up and down Speedway.
Oh, heavens above.
And that was the end of town.
And you came from where now to come here?
I came from Pittsburgh.
That's right, from Pittsburgh.
Came out here.
So maybe let's go back a little. Is a road glide like a Harley model? Is that the model of a motorbike?
It's the best Harley that was ever made.
Really?
Yes. A road glide is made for getting on the highway and gliding down the road.
Oh, lovely.
That's my favorite bike.
So you enjoy riding your Harley.
I do.
There's another thing that you get lost in, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's with the ball bit? What's that?
Well, everyone sees my bald head, and they wonder, is that by choice or is that by age of years? And I always let them know that that's by choice.
Now, for what it's worth, listeners, for what it's worth, I was asked to ask that, all right? Otherwise, I wouldn't dare. So what would be your focus then, Richard? I know you deliver full-cycle staffing solutions, whether that's short-term, contract, or long-term, or permanent. How do you work it all out? I mean, you're not really in the temp business, are you?
Correct. We're a staffing company, and we separate ourselves from a lot of the temp agencies that are here in Tucson that hire individuals for one day here and one day there. Our focus is to be able to match them with our clients so that they can become a permanent employee of that team. We therefore eliminate the need that the hiring manager has of spending time going through applications and sitting down talking to people. We're able to do that for them and to bring the professional approach to them so that we match them up with the perfect candidate.
Well, there are a few different ones in Tucson, but with Onan Staffing, I mean, it's a privately held, debt-free company. You've got something like, 100 branches throughout the U.S.?
We're actually at 117 now.
You're at 117?
Yes.
Gee, I wrote this last week. 17 more branches of that. You are growing, aren't you? You've joined the Tucson community with a fresh approach to staffing, all right? Now, this is what I'm excited about. Same old boring, interviews. What do you do that's fresh in the world of helping somebody find a career?
Well, I mentioned earlier that our focus was on working with clients and treating them like business partners. But the approach that we take also is to look at our individual candidates as teammates as opposed to temps. A lot of agencies treat them like temps, and they feel that way. So we've kind of flipped the script a little bit. We offer them benefits right after their first 30 days of employment. We treat them as a teammate or a member of our team, knowing that they have full employment with us. And that they're not going to be treated or sent out on a job that's not going to match them or be useful for them. And we're concerned about making sure that they have the tools that they need to be able to perform the job. So we have all in-person interviews. We don't do any phone screening and just send out resumes to individuals. We actually have them come into the office and meet with our recruiting team so that we can make sure that both sides win in this.
Well, I got to tell you, years ago, in between some radio and television jobs, in between jobs, I worked for a company, and I worked in the sales and marketing division of this company, and I placed more people in jobs than they'd ever done in their history. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fun, but I'd be honest with these guys, get a haircut, clean up, get rid of that beard, do what you got to do. And I would send them 3 really qualified jobs where I'd feel bad if the other 2 didn't get it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because I think you've got to put your heart into something like that. I mean, you care about your clients like partners.
Exactly. And so using your analogy, those 3 individuals that we cleaned up may be a perfect fit for company A, but those other individuals may be a perfect fit for company B.
Right.
And so that's why we want to have that in-person discussion with them so that we can make sure that we are sending them to the right person.
Now, what worries me is Tucson. You often hear there's not enough jobs. Not enough jobs. We've got to leave. We've got to go elsewhere. I got a bachelor in this and an MP in that and an MA there, and I'm serving behind a bar. Now, Is it getting better?
Well, I'm also a member of the Tucson Chamber. I'm an ambassador with the Tucson Chamber, and so I get to talk to a lot of business owners. And that's one of the common themes you hear. Well, unemployment is less than 4.9% now. Why do I need to use a staffing agency?
Right.
Well, it's because of that very reason. The people who you may need may already be employed somewhere else. And so a staffing agency will be able to help you find the best of the best.
So do you actually headhunt?
We do.
You take people away from people?
So
how does that measure up, though, in your partnership with them and you want a long-term relationship with the company? How do you do that?
Because just because you're with a company doesn't mean that that's the best fit for you. My goal was to help you find that forever job, that job that you want to stay at, not just till the end of the week and you receive your paycheck, but that job that you want to stay at for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's Jane Cathy, don't you think? And Paul, I mean, our day, maybe not Paul, he's too young, but in our day, we, I didn't mean it like that. Well, he's a baby, put it that way. But what I was getting at was you had to really sit in a job 3 to 5 years because if you moved too much, they didn't like it then. Now, from what I was reading the other day somewhere about, they expect you to leave every 2 years.
Well, you want to stay with a job as long as you're being productive and useful.
And if you love it there, why would you leave?
Exactly. But if you're not, then you want to make sure that you make a move. You don't want to sit there for 5 years burning up your good brain cells if it's not going to be a benefit to you and the rest of the company.
No, that's the thing. And you want to be happy too. Yeah. So if you do go after somebody, I've always wondered how that process works. It's like being a detective. Do you follow them? Do you go to lunch with them? Do you call them out of the blue and say, I have a client that would like to talk to you? What do you do?
Yes to all the above. So obviously we have a career site. We have a site, ownandstaffing.com, where individuals can come to us. But we're also actively looking in the community for individuals that will meet the needs that we have open. We post on all the job boards, just like every other agency does. But once you find that connection, and it could be someone that you met at lunch, it could be someone you met at a business meeting, and then you were able to place them in a company or with a client that's going to be a benefit to both sides of the team.
Well, that makes sense. That would certainly make sense. Trouvé, it's an unusual name. I know it's French for lucky find. How on earth did you come across that name, Paul?
Actually, one of the other people in the business, which happens to be my wife, she came up with the name. And as you know, Mark, she's also Australian. And she gets the sole credit for the name because once she discovered it and told us about it, it was a done deal.
There you go. Well done. The size of the small group travel industry, is it growing, smaller? I mean, have you experienced yourself companies that really don't know how to do this properly?
Yeah, I mean, the travel market, by definition, almost is huge, but the small group travel market is just a very, very small fraction of that. And there are small group travel companies in the U.S., but there isn't one that dominates the market. There is no Geico of small group travel, which actually is my goal. The first nationally known small group company in the country. If we get that, I think we're doing okay. And they range from uber luxurious to economical. Some have regional focus. So they have different takes on how they do it. But I wanted Trivet to have a distinction to be different. And so that's why we have the 3 different areas that we're focusing on. It's not just the big trips, because everybody frankly does the big trips. That makes sense. But adding the day trips, adding the B2B services, I think helps differentiate us from the competition, and actually it'll provide more stability down the road once all 3 activities get
once they all kick in. Now, the other interesting part about this, Richard and Kathy, is not only is it unusual in every other aspect of the word, what he's trying to do, but it's how he started the company. Do you want to share how all this has come about in reference to raising funds, where you're at now, and what the end goal is?
You know, this is my first experience in the startup business
Welcome.
universe, and it's wow. It's like the opposite of academia. Academia is calm, quiet, predictable, nice. The startup world is unpredictable, chaotic, hectic, uncertain. So I had to learn how to deal with that, which I think I have pretty well. But we are in the process of going through a regulated crowdfunding campaign. So we're raising money that way, and our goal is to raise $107,000 as soon as possible. And that's really, anybody really can invest as long as you meet the income requirements, which are not egregious at all. And it's a $200 minimum investment, and you get it's $100 per share, but $200 is the minimum. And it's simply meant to get us operating funds so we can grow, because really so far we've been bootstrapping the whole company. We have 2 partners. There's myself. We have a partner in New York City. We have Sarah, who does the admin and policy, who's my wife. And we have one trip host up in Oregon who does our Ireland trip. And it's just us. And we had no initial investment other than our own money. And getting enough business, we got a little bit of business loans, but it's certainly not a long-term thing. So we need capital investment really to grow. So that's really the ultimate goal right now.
There you go, with small groups, expert guides though, personalized service, and unique experiences. That's enough in the model to make it work. We wish you well with that. And the other thing is this, though, considering, how small and babyish you are, we talk about that, you still happen to win the 2018 award. That's the Reader's Choice Award for the Arizona Daily Star for the very best small group travel category. That's pretty cool. Eh?
Bravo.
Well done. Good on you, mate. Very good. So, Kathy, you've traveled a little. What do you love about travel?
I love, probably what most people love about travel is, seeing new places, meeting new people, really sort of the being able to see the society as a whole and be part of it, and the locations, of course. And I think, Mark, you and I had talked about specifically, I recently went to Australia, which was one of my first trips far away.
You and hubby, right?
Me and hubby and I, yes. Hubby and I went. And it was really just a fascinating trip, and I just loved it so much. I mean, it was just, and I am not a great flyer, so being on airplanes for long periods of time is really a little bit difficult to me. So I was nervous about that, but it was so worth it to get to Sydney and to see the things that I got to see. And I loved the people. I felt so at home in the country. I couldn't believe that I had traveled halfway around the world to get there. It was really just such an inclusive society, and it was so beautiful. And I just got to see so many things. So I think that's sort of on the top of my mind right now, because that was my most recent trip. And I know Mark, being from Australia, he and I had run into each other and talked about that a lot. Yeah,
well, I was sharing with you an exciting thing, because I love travel, and I've always said of the 16 years that I lived in America, I've met so many people. I was talking to Kathy about this at a function, who have said to me, God, I'd love to go to your country. I've always wanted to, and And I say, well, why not? Why haven't you done it? Oh, it's too far, or the flight's too long, or this or that. Then I explain it's not. They can go down further than that if you're going to Europe and going to Colombo or other places. But the reality is they would absolutely love it. So I said to Paul, Paul, I've always wanted to do this. Always wanted to take and show Americans my home. So I was very fortunate. He said, well, why don't we do it? And he's made me the ambassador for Down Under Tours. So that now, Richard, means you can come to Australia and New Zealand and the islands, because we have beautiful islands, of Australia. It's not all in the South, but not all in the Caribbean, The South Pacific has lovely islands. And we hope to do a tour next year.
Well,
so that'll be
one
fabulous.
of the things, speaking of Australia and the length of the trip, it was really sort of a tribute to how much I liked the country. Is that I said I would go back there in a heartbeat, so the idea of being on a plane from 14 to 18 hours really was worth it to me to go through that, to go to Australia. It was really,
So you went what? You would have gone Tucson to LAX?
I went Tucson to Phoenix and then Phoenix to LAX.
Okay.
Just because that's how the flights worked out.
Alrighty.
And then, LAX to Sydney.
And did you get a night flight or was it in the daytime?
On the way out, we did. We left LAX at about 11:30.
That's right. And, I love that flight because you get a lovely meal after you've been up in the air about an hour. And then all the free bottles of wine, that you like, of Australian, particularly on Qantas. I don't know what the others do, but I'll have to find out.
Oh, it is.
The others too?
All the drinks that you want, we had, yes.
And add to that, Richard, if you like movies, do you like movies?
Of course.
Right. Well, how about movies that aren't even in the picture theaters yet? Right? You get to see them first. So you're going to tell me after 3 bottles of red, a nice meal, and 3 movies, you go to sleep. Next minute, they're tapping you on the shoulder and you're flying over the Harbour Bridge or something
And to
like
the
that.
extent you're tired at all after having been on the plane all that time, the excitement about landing in Australia and in Sydney
7 in the morning,
really
that's
gives
it.
you, you have the jolt, so the lack of sleep or the travel, that way really didn't have any effect. Now, the way back is a little bit different. And that's a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
But getting there is just so exciting.
Well,
My
it is.
mouth was
It is.
open the whole, from the time I stepped off the plane, I was just agog at everything.
Well, you got to catch those flies, mate. You want to be careful. And you basically saw Sydney, correct?
Sydney, yeah. We stayed just in Sydney, and we were there from a Saturday to a Saturday. So we had a week.
I had a week. And see what I mean? I mean, that's amazing.
Absolutely.
To go 13,000 miles for one, with all due respect, lousy week. Would you have loved a month?
Oh, I could have easily done a month. Absolutely easily.
Well, this trip next year, Richard, we're planning 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it's going to be massive cities. You're going to land in Sydney, then to Melbourne, my hometown. And all these different cities have different things to offer. Culture, food, you name it, right? And the harbour, of course, the beautiful cruise around the harbour is stunning, right? And then we're going to go to Adelaide, which is the beautiful city of churches and museums and other things. But you go north of Adelaide to the Barossa Valley. It's gorgeous. It's the vineyards like your Sonoma Valley here, And then up to the heart of Australia, Alice Springs. That's where the Uluru is and the Bungle Bungles and look, it's wonderful. And all the Aboriginals dance and so on with their beautiful colours and it's spectacular. And then we cut across northeast to Cairns. Not where they have the movies overseas in Europe. This is a different Cairns. Cairns. But it's the gateway to the Barrier Reef. And you can fish and swim with the fish and you can go to the Coranda Railway. There's so many things to do. Then back to Sydney. But taking your leaf out of your book there, instead of flying all the way back to LAX, we're going to fly to Hawaii and have a break for a couple of days, get our legs back, and then fly into
I think that's really wise because the most unpleasant part for me was the trip back. That was really so.
It's tad because you arrived tired.
Oh yeah,
but you had a wonderful time.
We did. But flying during the day, we came back during the day, and so we left Sydney at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, and we got back to Tucson at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, and our bodies really felt that.
You know
that
why?
Was the
well, the daytime
part.
is the worst because you've also crossing the the what's it called again? The
line.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's it.
So the stop in Hawaii, I give a big thumbs up to. Yeah.
Richard, have you traveled much?
This sounds exciting. So 3 years ago, I was married to my new bride here, and she convinced me to take a cruise. So we did the Royal Caribbean cruise.
Oh, lovely.
Did the islands, and that was my first time really out of the country.
Really?
And I have the bug now. So we're planning another trip on the cruise.
All right. Well, but you can do land and cruising,
yeah,
you know.
We may throw this in the mix, too.
Throw it in the mix, man. Yeah,
exciting.
but I love cruising. I met my wife on a cruise, actually, and in the Caribbean. And it was very, very nice. And I loved cruising. That just got me, you know. But I do like to see other things. I like to explore, and I just don't want to stay on the boat all the time, you know. And what does appeal to me now are some of those trips you see down the Rhine and what have you. But if you can get off and get a bit of history in there and really do stuff, that'd be fair. So there we go. I'm enjoying this travel show, really.
I won't talk about my seasicknesses and my bad experience cruising.
I had a wonderful time on the cruise. It was 7 days, and we got off the ship four times during that 7 days, so it was really nice.
Back on the boring business, Richard, what is the best way for a potential candidate to learn about the current openings, perhaps, that you may have on your books?
Awesome question. So we have our career site, ownandstaffing.com, and candidates can always go on there and click the Apply Now link, and they'll be able to put their information in there, and they can see what we have open, and we can reach out to them. But also, we have an office right here on Speedway and Swan, and we're open Monday through Friday. They can stop by anytime and talk to myself or any of our recruiting team, and we'll be more than happy to take care of their staffing needs and their employment needs.
You're listening to Richard Phipps, Kathy Winger, and Paul Hardison, my guest today on Tucson Means Business with Mark Bishop. And, of course, it's coming to you on Tucson Business Radio X, America's fastest leading business radio network. And my studio is situated in the Stewart Title Building, their corporate offices on Broadway. 4.6%. Why use a staffing agency, says the gentleman. How do you answer that?
Well, since that number is so low, and since talent is so scarce, you want to make sure that you utilize your time wisely and not chasing after people that are not going to be a good fit for you.
Okay.
So that's why you come to us, to make sure that we use that time wisely.
Are more executives getting, fed up with trying to find the right people themselves anyway? They've got more to do, right?
They are, exactly. You mentioned, Paul mentioned that he was spending a lot of time getting his business started. He doesn't have time to go there and look at resumes or to interview individuals. That's very time consuming.
What geography does Onan cover then in Tucson, greater or where?
So we have branches from Florida all the way to Tucson. I'm the furthest south. But here in the Tucson area, I take care of anything from Oro Valley all the way down to south of Tucson.
Okay, so it's quite a big area.
Yes.
And all age groups?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you obviously have to go out and hunt business too, so you visit a lot of companies, right?
That's one of the advantages of being part of the Tucson Chamber. Is you get
Yes.
to meet a lot of people that way. I'm also a SHRM member and on the Diversity and Inclusions Committee. And so just by networking with people, and I've been in Tucson since forever, 1967. So you get to meet business owners and find out what their needs are and spend time with them to help them be successful.
Interesting. Paul, I'm interested from a business point of view, because we touched on it before. How does Trouvé address the issue of doing business for businesses to find out what they really want?
Well, the B2B aspect of the business is something that we're just starting. So that needs to be developed. But businesses, well, there are different ways we can do this. It can, like you mentioned, it could be conferences or big events at a different location outside of Tucson, but we can also help businesses in Tucson. And one example that comes to mind is companies like, let's say, Roche. They bring people into Tucson who are visiting, who are potential employees. Well, they often need somebody to show them around Tucson. Well, that's something that we can do.
Right.
So we have 2-day trips set up already. One's to the Sonoita Wineries, one's to Kip Peak National Observatory.
What a good idea.
Science-focused. But we're also working on a very specially curated culinary day trip, which fits Tucson being a gastronomic capital, that we're going to pick a select number of restaurants, work with them, work with their chefs, and develop special plates that the group will go visit over the course of a day and get to really experience the taste of Tucson.
That's very good.
That's fun.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned before, it's interesting because I know with your travel guests now and the trips that you're taking, they're not all out of Tucson, these PAXs, as they're called in the industry. These people are from all across America.
Yeah, actually, most of our customers so far are not Tucsonians. Our main trip are people from around the country, from North Carolina to Georgia to Oklahoma. And it's a very diverse group, and there's a reason for that, though. And one of the best things that I've discovered so far doing business is finding strategic partnerships. And that partnership was with the owner of GetMainLobster.com, which is a direct-to-consumer lobster company, and I've used their services. And of all things, I ran across the owner on Twitter, because I was sort of hunting around. I was kind of stalking lobster companies, which is not something everybody does. But we struck up a conversation, told him about our trip, and he has been very gracious. We have piggybacked on his email marketing. And Mark Morrell, he's an absolutely great guy. I met him for the first time when we were in Maine earlier this month. He was a part of our trip, and it has been a really fruitful partnership, and we're doing it again next year. First week of June, and we're going to do it all over again. It was an excellent time.
Yeah, listen, I'd love to do that one, Kathy, I tell you, because I love lobster.
Absolutely.
And I've never seen the East Coast. That's a lie, Mark. I've been to New York, and I went to Long Island for a short visit. That was it of the East Coast. But I believe Maine and other beautiful places up north there. America's got a lot of beautiful places to see and do.
Absolutely.
And I think once Tucson, the Tucsonans, as I was corrected on once, I used to say Tucsonians like somebody else, but now I say Tucsonans because they rang me up on air, and I thank you very much for that because it was very good. You're not to know, being if it takes 30 years, to speak the language here, and then you're a local. You know that, don't you?
I do. I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way.
So tell me, Kathy, what are some questions that new business owners should ask their business attorney?
Thanks for bringing that topic up, Mark. That's sort of a passion of mine in terms of business owners, new business owners. I love working with companies that are new and just starting. I create a lot of LLCs, a lot of corporations, so I'm there on the ground floor for a lot of my clients. So I think a lot about what sorts of things that I like to share with them and like them to be aware of, and I've sort of turned that into questions that they should be asking any business attorney, not me, but it comes directly from my practice. And my website, I have a blog where I write articles, and that's one of the articles that I wrote is, four questions you should ask your business attorney. So the first thing is always, what form of entity makes sense for you? Should you be an LLC? Should you be a corporation? Should you be a solo practitioner? Should you be an individual? What should you do? How should you operate your business? In most cases, a small and medium-sized businesses, new businesses, opt to start out as an LLC. And so that's the entity that they create. But it's not just a legal issue. It really is an accounting issue as well. And so I oftentimes will work with my client's accountant as to what makes sense from a tax perspective, from a numbers perspective, as to the form of entity, or the accountant will work with me. So we really do work as a team. So that's really the first consideration because you're starting your business. And how are you going to operate your business? And you want to start correctly. You want to start with everything set up legally correctly.
You want your foundations right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I like to get in on the ground floor to help my clients do that. The other things that I recommend that people think about are what sorts of risks are you going to be facing as a business? Because as a business lawyer, I'm really a risk manager. That's what I do for my clients. I help them manage legal risks. The goal is that legal risks don't destroy their company.
Yeah, right. Keep me out of jail and my taxes low.
Well, and lawsuits, protect yourself from lawsuits and make sure you're operating properly. So it's really managing those risks. So, and that's very business dependent. What kinds of regulations are you going to have to comply with? What, are you going to have employees? How many employees? What do you have to do if you have employees? So those are the general sort of legal risks that are out there depending on the type of business that you're operating. The third thing that I like people to think about, and again, this is an early on concern that I like them to keep in mind, is your business going to have any intellectual property that you need to protect? Are there patents involved? Are there copyrights? Are you trademarking a name? Are you going, if you're not going to be doing it in the beginning, but eventually you plan to, there are still things that you need to keep in mind as you're operating, and you may as well start doing that when you start operating your business. So I like to sort of put that bug in people's ears years, even if they're not ready to address the intellectual property issue at the very beginning. And then the fourth one that I like to talk about, and this is really, I've run into this so many times with clients and people who have come to me, is what kind of contracts are you entering into, and how are you obligating your business? Because I can't tell you how many times people have come to me after they've already signed a contract. And once they've signed the contract, there is not a lot that I can do for them. They're bound by whatever the terms are. And more often than not, they've signed a contract with terrible terms from their perspective, and they want to get out of it and they want to terminate it, but the contract doesn't have any right of termination. So I end up saying, if you had come to me before you signed this contract, I would never have advised you to sign it. We would have negotiated terms that were favorable to you. So I like for people to be conscious of the idea that when they're signing a contract, they're obligated by its terms. So I always advise, have an attorney look at it beforehand and talk to you about it beforehand so that you can be clear, this is what you're getting yourself into. Are you okay with this? Do you need to be able to get out of it? All of those things. And then along those same lines, in terms of the contract, and again, I've represented businesses and been involved in business law for more years that I really want to mention, especially after your comment about our age being the same.
It's a beautiful day. There's blue sky. It's sunshine. It's about 75 in Tucson.
But anyway, one of the things that I see when I talk about entities and creating an entity, it's a separate entity. It's not you. I'm Kathy Winger, and a separate entity would be KD Winger PLLC, the company. Well, when you enter into a contract, you want to do it in the name of the company. I have so many people or clients who I create a corporation for them, and then they give me a contract to review, and it's their name individually, and that defeats the whole purpose of creating the separate entity. So those are sort of some things.
Big things.
And when I was listening to both of the other guests talk about, business owners are busy running their business. Business owners aren't busy thinking about legal issues that are out there and what they need to address. That's not their business. I like to do that for them so that they can run their business and not have to worry about those issues, be protected on those issues.
Well, needless to say then, Kathy, on the other hand, in the second place, and furthermore, when it comes to an operating agreement, a buy-sell agreement, you've got to look the other side. And if I was starting a business, I should come to you at that time before I structure anything. So that it is correct for people I'm going to deal with at the same time.
And the other thing, and especially with buy-sell agreements, I work a lot with businesses that are buying other businesses or businesses that are selling. The beauty of having a lawyer is that lawyer represents just you. So their only concern is your interest and the protection of your interest, and having the agreement effectuate what you want. There's such a huge value to that, especially when you're talking about another party selling the business and you want to buy it, and you're negotiating prices and terms and things like that. You want to have somebody on your team who, from a legal perspective, is going to be looking out for only you and your business's legal interests. That's really critical.
Speaking of that, Paul, when it comes to travel, I mean, are there a lot of, open can worms there to worry about? I mean, can people sue and do things if you don't do things diligently? Or what did you go into when you started this business?
Yeah, completely uninformed. So actually, I'm actively working with an insurance company in town right now to define general liability coverage that we should have. So I'm doing that now. So that's good. But for our
that exonerates you then, doesn't it?
Right. And for our international trips, as a part of the package, we provide travel insurance.
Well, that's a good thing.
So everybody's covered in every way possible. So if something happens,
Well, that's good. I mean, it's business. These are all the things that turn people off going into business, quite frankly. You've got to do things correctly. Now, we haven't got a lot of time left, so I really do want to touch on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Data breaches. Why should business owners, be concerned so much about that?
Well, they should be concerned because they're happening so frequently, and there's such exposure to any size company that handles data on any basis. And the exposure is really in terms of data breaches and also in terms with compliance with regulations. And I was just thinking as you were talking, I don't know how your business works internationally or whether you market to international clients, but when I think of data breaches and when I think of regulation, I think of the European Union's GDPR regulation and the requirement that you comply with it, and the consequences of not complying with it can be very severe. And U.S. companies, depending on how they market and who they market to and how they serve, can be covered by the regulation. And so they have to comply with that. And they might not know it, because who might think, I'm a business in Tucson, Arizona. Why on earth would I have any concerns about the Europeans' GDPR? That's ridiculous. Well, when you look at the regulation, it reaches out. It looks to who your customers are and who you're advertising and marketing to. Because the point of these regulations and what's happening with the data breach regulations, they're trying to protect, and they're looking at consumers. And they're saying to consumers, your information has value and you have rights over your information. And we're going to enact these statutes, especially the GDPR, that gives you certain rights. And if businesses don't comply with your rights, then they can be held, they can be penalized for it. And I even noticed just on the news the other day, Senator Mark Warner, who is a U.S. senator, is talking about a bill that he's proposing that would make companies reveal to consumers how much their information is worth, what monetary value they put on their information. That would be huge, because that would be a statutory recognition of consumers giving something of value when you just give your information, like your name, your address, your social security number, all of those things. That prior to now, that hasn't been viewed as something of value that you share with a company. If it's something of value that you share with a company, and a company has to say to you, this is how much we value you, this is what it's worth, consumers are going to look differently at it. So that trend, the way that affects my clients and affects businesses all over the country and really all over the world, is if you're dealing with consumers in other countries or other states, if they have these regulations, even though you don't technically operate in those states, you may be governed by them. So that's the compliance side of what I do. The data breaches are really, when you've had a data breach, what can you do beforehand to protect yourself if you have a data breach? To say, I did everything that I should have done. There wasn't anything else I could have done. Everybody recognizes that there's no 100% protection against data breaches, but you have to handle information properly. You have to be careful with it. And so the data breach side of it is make sure that you're doing that. So if, heaven forbid, you have a data breach, you can defend yourself. But the compliance is really the bigger issue that I see these days. California has a new regulation that they're coming out with. And, I joke and say the GDPR came out and everybody was sort of like, we can't believe this regulation, this GDPR. And California said, hold my beer. We're going to do our own regulation. And so it's just
while they go broke in the meantime,
but further and further.
Well, let me ask you this then, on closing on the topic itself. Does Arizona have any laws related to cybersecurity?
At this point, they do. They have what's fairly typical in most states. I think 48 out of the 50 states have data breach notification statutes. And those are statutes. Arizona just amended its statute recently. And again, you can go to my website. I've done an article summarizing it. kdwinger.com is where my website is. They have one that addresses and deals with what you have to do in the event of a data breach in Arizona. The issue in that area, and sort of a huge problem or a huge obstacle, is the fact that there isn't any federal regulation. There are, as I said, 48 to 49 states that have their own data breach statutes. If you have a data breach, you have to look or have someone look at all of those statutes to make sure what you have to comply with based on your business.
Kathy, you're not too expensive, are you? Please.
I am worth every penny, Mark. You can talk to any of my clients, and I'm sure they would confirm it.
KD Winger. KDwinger.com.
Yes.
And Kathy at KDwinger.com.
Yes, you can follow me.
Listen,
and one more thing, I'm going to say one more thing before you. I try to keep people apprised of what's going on, especially in the cybersecurity area, with my Twitter and my website. So feel free to follow me. Things that I see, I try to get out that I want people to know.
I tell you what we do with our guests on our shows. I'm not going to go through a list of all your social media contacts. We publish it all for you, and it stays there forever.
Perfect.
So, Richard, you'll be up there with Onan. A quick one for you. Do you come into any of this rubbish at all to do with laws and thingos, appointing people in jobs, or?
Well, it's interesting. So
Did you just call it rubbish?
No.
But you mentioned business owners having to look at contracts to make sure that they sign and the contract benefits them. Well, it's the same thing with employment, is that when you hire someone, you're making a contract with them. So another service that we offer is payrolling, where we will actually employ the person that you want on our payroll and take care of their benefits and take care of the HR side of it, so that you can then have a good time to determine if this is a good fit for you.
Really?
And you may do that for 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And then decide, yes,
I've never
I'm
heard
gonna
of
bring
that
them on.
before.
And that way, you don't have to worry about that contract being a bad contract. You know at the end, it's going to be a good contract for you because you had time to watch them every day.
Right. Well, there
And
you go.
I know you're being super careful with the information that you're sharing and the way that you're doing it to keep that data secure.
Exactly.
No, good boy. You got it.
My roots are in HR.
There we go.
Oh, dear. Now, I like to close the show with off the heavy business stuff and a little bit of fun. Paul, where did you meet your wife? The lovely Sarah.
Oh, you want that story, don't you?
No, I want 1 minute version of it.
Well, it's all good. The question of why would you, by chance, want to meet your spouse next door when you can meet her 8,500 miles away from where you live? And that's where I met Sarah, through eharmony.com.
Isn't that a twist?
I was in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and she was in Brisbane.
Australia.
Yes, Australia. And it was funny because within a week, it's like, oh, this is something good. And so over the course of talking and video chatting, and we met for the first time in Newark, New Jersey, and then in Hawaii, and then in San Diego, and then she had applied for her visa. She got it. She came. She stayed. She's here.
There you
got married.
go.
So it worked out ridiculously well. I mean,
Very good.
It was kind of crazy, but it's been the best thing.
And what about you, Kathy? Where did you meet the better half?
Well, interestingly enough, I was in Philadelphia, and he was in Sierra Vista, Arizona. He's originally from the Philadelphia area, and through his mother, who is my now mother-in-law, and a friend of mine's sister-in-law, they fixed us up on a blind date, and he came back to Pennsylvania, and we had the blind date. And I will tell you, I went on the blind date thinking this is the best blind date in the world, because if he's a loser, he's in Arizona. I'll never have to see him again. Because I figured, of course he would be crazy about me. Yeah, he'd be crazy about me, and I wouldn't like him. And then I met him, and within 5 minutes of meeting him, I was like, oh, I'm getting married and moving to Arizona.
Yeah.
And within a year, I was living
So
out
did you
here.
apologize to him for your thoughts?
No.
You never told him that, did you?
No, I didn't. I'm sure he felt the same way.
All right, Mr. Phipps.
I think that's amazing. We all have kind of similar stories. I met my wife online as well. She was in Mexico, and I was here in Tucson, Arizona. And we corresponded for 3 or 4 months, and finally met face to face at a Circle K at a McDonald's in Nogales, Arizona.
I know that McDonald's.
That was our first meeting, and then we were together, and we've been married for 3 years. Our anniversary's
Nice.
coming up next week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that fabulous? That's marvelous. Three
How'd you
wonderful
meet your
guests.
spouse, Mark?
As a matter of fact, I was on a cruise in the Caribbean. I think I was 46, still never married, minding my own business, happy as Larry. And bingo.
The rest is history.
I went back to Australia. We said, we're not going to call. It's too late at night. The time changes and all this crap. We lasted 2 days. She flew out there, and I said, I would like to come to America, but I've just started this company, and I'd have to sell it and get rid of it and all that jazz. And then she rang again. I said, I tell you what. I said, I'd love to come. but you're going to have to come out here and dig me out the last 3 feet, you know. And I think she got a passport in 5 minutes. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. And she came out and literally we packed everything up and that was it. We came back to America through Hawaii and to Tucson and flew in over Tucson's industrial. I wonder what the hell I'd gone to. and then, you know, we went to Phoenix, lived there for 10 years because there were more business opportunities at that stage years ago. And then back down under and New Zealand and the islands and Vanuatu and through our businesses. And then back to America where we're Tucsonans. Tucsonans.
Correctly pronounced.
And
very good.
it's a wonderful place to live. There's no doubt about it. So, look, thank you. Richard Phipps is the manager, the district manager, and the general manager and chief cook and bottle washer, the whole lot for Onan staffing here in Tucson. You can get all these details. Lovely gentleman and the great firm. If you're looking for a good gig or maybe you need somebody for a good gig, give Onan a shot. Have a look at their site and all their details on our site, TucsonBusinessRadioX.com. You will see it there. Just press the actual banner for Tucson Means Business. Kathy Winger, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
It was lovely having you. Kathy is, she's a whiz, a lawyer and a specialist in cybersecurity, all sorts of good things. You're going to read about her. And katiewinger.com is where you can start, at least with that one. Paul Hardison, the founder, CEO, and chief cook and bottle washer at the moment, along with Sarah. I mean, they're working their little backsides off, aren't you, building this company? And I'm very pleased, though, to announce that Paul is actually going to be doing a travel show. And it's going to be called Trouvé Travel Talk. And it's going to be here on the network, and it starts he just did his first show recording, and it goes to air now, as a matter of fact. But it's going to be interesting with the different people he's going to be having on talking about travel and their experiences, good and bad, but what they've learnt. The whole show is about what people can learn from all the wonderful places in the world. When you look at it today with online and everything, it's such a small globe, you know.
Can you get that show on your site? Is that how?
Oh, my word. And you can get it on your mobile. You can get it on your phone.
You can get so that's where you would go for Paul's show as well.
Oh, very much so. Yes, just go to Tucson, www.TucsonBusinessRadioX.com.
Great.
It's a global print. It's heard all over the world. But not only that, we put the shows out on all of the podcast platforms, so it gets heard everywhere. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Wonderful
Mark.
shows.
Thank
Lovely
you.
having you.